What I'm trying to do is get Jewish scholars interested in the study of the roots of anti-Semitism. And I believe that this is really where it really originated.
Sure.
And I also think that, as we talked about before, that there were Jews who were screaming from the grave, trying to get this information out.
Sure.
And they never were heard because nobody understood what they were saying.
Right. Well, the Catholic Church had a strict policy regarding this sort of information being made public.
I mean, people were murdered because they were trying to get this information out.
Right.
When people were found out, they were mysteriously disappeared.
Right. Right. I mean, the most classic example of Marlowe, because there is literature, in fact, stating he had written a book that was, making it clear the Gospels were written by a single man and not by God. When you have a letter like that describing the actual book that Marlowe wrote, and then look at his plays and understand how they are representing the Gospels, Jesus, Titus typology, then you know what happened. The state just crushed him. They killed him. So that was, and he, remember, had been highly regarded by the court and by the church. He was actually being groomed to be the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was a brilliant young man. So the Jewish scholars of the Middle Ages, and a number of them did, in fact, have decoded the Gospels. I have no explanation as to exactly why the information didn't come out, but I can show you a number of works of literature that seem to have this information, and I just don't think they knew exactly what to do with it and how to make it public. And of course, the church, if someone did try to have a overt, decoding of the Gospels, it would have been just a death sentence. It wouldn't have, but it wouldn't surprise me if there had been a number of efforts like this.
Well, I know that there have been efforts to try to allude to it, but the thing is that people, once they knew this information, would look back after the fact and say, this is what they've been trying to tell us. I think that the people the mystics of Safad, who wrote the prayer poetry, were putting some of that information in their prayer poetry.
Sure.
And it wasn't actually until someone like you could figure out what was going on that people would be able to find out and say, oh, this mystic knew.
Right. That's right.
And that they were lampooning the royals.
Right. And that's why they were mystics, in quote, is that they were putting their language in a very symbolic level, just because that was all that was available to them. It is really going to be curious to see how much of the existing sort of understanding of literature holds up. I hate to say this, but in fact, there have been a lot of people who knew the truth about the Gospels throughout history. I wasn't the first one to.
And they were all
them.
Screaming from the grave, and I think
they tried. As I see it, my interpretation of history is simply that those that were overt or clear enough so they could be understood, that those efforts were destroyed by the church and the state, which was using the church as its basis for existence of the divine right of kings, are simply very symbolic and now can be decoded. Which is why the Shakespearean literature is so interesting in that it's such a well-formed body of literature regarding the understanding of the Gospels from the graves of Jews. Amelia Bassano was a Marano who told history the truth, and she was able to live to actually a ripe old age.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, she did. But she had a troubled life, nevertheless. She's certainly one of history's most interesting characters, and I'm happy that we're able to bring her information to the public. It really is certainly long overdue.
I think that's great. Well, I thank you very much for all this intriguing information. I think this is like I mean, you're the Indiana Jones of typology.
I don't know. I just. It always comes up. People say, "Well, you don't have the background in any of these fields. Why do you see these things?" And I have no real explanation other than I'm just a very curious reader, and Somehow it all made sense to me. And once I saw the beginnings of the system, then I had the energy. I was really wanted to see really what was in back of it. I noticed there were strange parallels between Titus and Jesus. I had no agenda against Christianity. I certainly didn't think it would lead to a new understanding of the Gospels. But
well, don't you see what Christianity has led to?
I absolutely. Particularly now that I've been able to decode the literature, I was raised a Catholic and fell away from the faith just because of it's just the era when my generation did that. I didn't have any particular reason for falling away, but I really didn't have a clear understanding of history. The anti-Semitism in the Gospels is very subtle. It's very subtle.
Subtle? I don't think it's subtle. I think
no,
it's very
in the way
blatant.
I think it's subtle in the way it impacts people. In other words, the story of the Jews killing the beloved God-man, crying out, saying his blood will be on our blood and on our children's blood. The anti-Semitism that the Gospels couldn't work its anti-Semitism as effectively as it has if it was just stupid and overt. They make the reader love the Jesus character.
But they knew that.
And then they find a way to make the Jews' killing of Jesus reflect upon them, not the Romans.
But they knew that the Jews weren't going to buy the story.
Sure. Well, the Zealots. What the purpose of the Gospels is the same as the Arch of Titus.
It's a monument.
It's a vanity piece. It's just a way of notifying history that we were that clever and that we defeated them. And it's more than just that. The battle was fought over who was God. The Caesars were divine. They had made themselves God. It was part of their political power. And the God that the Jews worshipped was a threat to their political power. And so they warped the Jewish scripture into showing that, in fact, it was looking to Caesar, because that was what they wanted to do with the gospel. So as far as a conversion tool, I think it's absolutely not the case that the gospel was read to messianic zealots in the first century. No, that they didn't do that. If you look at the catacombs, which of course were started by the Flavians,
Yeah.
oddly, and all of the first saints are of course the Christian Flavians, who are all related to or employees of the Flavian family. That was where that's where the religion would have began, would have been in the imperial cult in Rome. So no, they certainly weren't using the Gospels to try to convert zealots. They would have they would have laughed at them and tried to kill the individual who was blaspheming their scripture.
So why do people think that Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism? That baffles me.
It is amazing. It's simply because the character claims to be Jewish, and he cites Jewish scripture. There is absolutely nothing in the origin of Judaism that suggests a Jewish origin. People have just bizarre fantasies trying to explain how a mystery cult morphed with Judaism and out popped Christianity, or a Markian community suddenly had a new idea about the scripture, or Paul, for example. How this individual had his epiphany and then sort of saw a kind of Judaism that could abide with the Roman Empire. This is all just ludicrous. It's as I said, there was really only there was only one delineation in Judaism, and that was if you were for the empire, abide with the empire, or you didn't. If you didn't, you would probably be looking at the messianic scriptures in the way the individual who wrote the Habakkuk Pesher, the Dead Sea Scroll, did, that he's looking to someone who has divine power. And that person doesn't want the Romans around. He wants to have reestablish the Jewish state that the Maccabees created. On the other hand, the Herods and the Alexanders, they're just fine with pro-Roman Judaism, which is what Christianity is. So
it is.
Yeah,
it's definitely.
It's not real. It is not an offshoot of Judaism. It is what it is. It's another form of the imperial cult. That's really what Christianity is.
Okay, well, you know, John Hudson had described the structure of the Gospels, and it explains that what they were trying to do is create a substitute or a satirical version of the Torah, and then they turned it into a piece of Roman literature and then a piece of Greek literature, and they were trying to encompass everybody. So
they were making a piece of literature that they wanted to represent their divinity. So they, you know, you can see reflections of Homer and Julius Caesar and other characters pop up in the Gospels, and a lot of scholars have seen this and noted that there's these strange links to Roman and Greek traditions in the Gospels, and you know, why in the world are they there? They certainly aren't in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That's true.
But you know, it's because this is where the literature originates.
Well, I thank you very much for coming by again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I want to encourage Jewish scholars to look into this, and I thank everybody for tuning in to Rod FM.